Hi, I'm Jack West, medical oncologist in Seattle, Washington. The FDA just gave a new approval for next-generation sequencing, or what we'd call genomic sequencing, a broad range of testing for several hundred genes across a wide range of solid tumors, essentially all of the solid tumors, that is, the ones that are not leukemias or lymphomas that we call liquid tumors, but solid tumors being lung and breast cancer and prostate and various others. And the FDA approval is for a specific test by Foundation Medicine that looks at over 300 different genes. And this is also accompanied by an announcement by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that the intent is for this to also be covered by Medicare and Medicaid. This is really a change in how we practice medicine, and it's going to usher in a new era of molecular oncology. Of course, we have a lot of optimism about that, and we hope to find new targets and new treatments for patients, but I think we also need to be cautious about the potential challenges and problems with that. Now, I will say that just in the last few weeks since this has been enacted, I've ordered NGS testing on some of my patients, and it's really a relief to be able to order this with the confidence that patients aren't going to be saddled with the cost of a test that costs several $1,000s. This is certainly something that many of us have been concerned about, but there are other issues with this. So first, the potential good side. Of course, if we're doing broad testing of many different kinds of cancers, including ones where there's still a lot of unknowns about any potential targeted therapies, the hope is that we can identify targets for which we have treatments that are available and that will work for patients and that were previously unsuspected for them. So that's great, but it is worth noting that we don't at this point in late 2017 have evidence that is real proof that doing NGS testing and treating on the basis of that NGS broad sequencing leads to better outcomes than more limited testing for the markers that we've already established as appropriate for lung cancer or breast cancer or something else. There's certainly a good reason to be hopeful about that, but at this point we don't have complete proof about that, and I think there is some concern that it won't actually pan out when we look with the benefit of time, that next generation sequencing necessarily is going to lead to a huge boom in better outcomes. Let's hope, but we don't know that yet. Now, the concerns I have are really two, and one relates to the cost of this change. The testing itself, as I mentioned, costs several $1,000s, and that's likely to come down as the technology evolves. That's the way that most technology works. I actually don't think that the cost of the testing is really that much of an issue, although certainly when it's done for hundreds of thousands or a few million patients every year, that's going to add up. But the bigger cost issue relates to the cost of the treatments, because most of these targeted therapies cost $10,000 or more each month, potentially $15,000 or more, and that may go up over time. So that is potentially appropriate and reasonable, possibly, if it's a treatment that is highly likely to be effective and that has some demonstrated efficacy. However, if it's a treatment that is being given based on not that good evidence and just a hope or a guess that a treatment will be good, that several $1,000s, more than $10,000 a month, is really going to add up to a big problem that may really be more than we can manage as a healthcare system, particularly if the presumption is that insurers need to pay for it. If a doc and a patient have an idea of a treatment that could work, that it should be paid for, because that could really be a big expense and may not pan out to be much of anything. The other issue beyond the cost is the potential to actually do harm to patients. And it's worth remembering that even though these are targeted therapies that tend to have different and often fewer side effects than conventional chemotherapy, for instance, there is no cancer treatment that is without risk or side effects. And so some of these could have pretty significant risks and side effects, and that is even relative to taking nothing but supportive care or a placebo. But there's also a risk that people will make poor decisions and choose a less established treatment instead of one that is more established just because they're following the hope that targeted therapy is better. It's this year's model instead of last year's model. And I think there's a real risk because I've seen several patients get bad choices of treatments from misguided decisions that have discarded an established but not sexy approach in favor of a premise, just a concept that targeted therapy could be better, but it's really based on very weak evidence. And unfortunately, what often accompanies these large reports from genomic testing is not just a list of the mutations that have an established treatment, but mutations that could possibly be helpful to treat with this or that targeted therapy based on mouse models or other preclinical, not human evidence. And I think that's where we really get into risk. Because we'd hate to substitute a less established treatment that may be a waste of time and missed opportunity because we've chosen something based on really weak evidence and just a vague hope that a targeted therapy will be better. So these are the issues that we need to address, and there are some early efforts to categorizing the quality of the evidence for clinicians and patients based on whether this is a target with an FDA-approved treatment or a clearly established treatment, maybe in a different tumor type that makes good sense. If there is other clinical evidence in early studies, that is human patients, that looks good, or if it's based on preclinical data that is not human evidence and it's just early lab-based data suggesting that there could be a benefit. Because I think the real key to whether this approach of molecular oncology is a big benefit for patients or whether it ends up being a costly mistake for us that sends us down a lot of rabbit holes is really just based on how intelligently we use the information that's coming in. We are going to get more data than we know what to do with, so we really need to be wise about how best to use that data and be judicious in the treatment. So this is going to be a new era, and we will have to see whether it is a brand new day of better outcomes or whether this really just escalates the cost of cancer treatment without translating to benefits. So we'll learn more soon.